Welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. Today we're going to be joined by Weston Ranch basketball coach Chris Teevan. Chris just brought his Weston Ranch basketball team from a tournament in Arizona where they had some success. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Welcome, Coach.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me, producing it, and taking time in the middle of the day to hang out.
Yes, sir. Joining me is Scott Bryant. Scott and I are both Linden grads. You know, Scott and I kind of just thought that, you know, this platform would be great for the kids and giving them an opportunity. You know, why don't you give us a little bit of your history, kind of your background? You and I talked a little bit offline about, you know, how long you've been at Western Ranch and kind of where the program was and where you brought it to today.
Yeah, so I took over, I took over 9 years ago, so, this will be my 9th year. I was super young as head coach. I think I was hired at 23. Coach JC, assistant JC coach for a couple of years. Early on with the first group we had a really young group. They really put us on like the sectional level. We won a section title over Manteca, I believe my 4th year. And then this past group that we just had kind of took us to state level, where it was we won the NorCal championship, won a section title, and probably the biggest thing we did was qualify for Open, the Open division 2 years ago. And then with this group we have now, we're really trying to hit the national level, and that's kind of what this weekend was about. We went down to the Border League, and a really good group, and they were able to win one of the top brackets down there. So we're getting a lot of love and attention for it, but it's really been a steady progression from when I first took over.
So why don't you give us what is the Border League?
So it's an invite only tournament, and they got some of the it's basically an AAU tournament, but only with high school teams. But the high school teams have to play as AAU teams. They had 2 top brackets of 8 teams. So the very top bracket was actually you could watch it on ESPN. Some of the games were on ESPN.
Oh, jeez.
And then we were so there were the 2 top 8 brackets, and then we were the next one. So there were 6 16-team brackets underneath those top 2, and us and another bracket were equal. So there's well over 100 teams at different sites, and that's kind of how that went.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Now, I'm guessing this is probably the biggest tournament that, outside of, the section and state playoffs and those types of things. This is probably the biggest tournament you guys have attended in terms of talent and, reaching throughout the United States.
Yeah, so the same guys who run this one usually run it's called the Section 7, which it's the same thing, just usually in the summertime. And this year they were supposed to have it where the Arizona Cardinals play football. So all teams under one roof. And when it's a normal time, usually when we played there 2 summers ago, we had hundreds of coaches at our games.
Jeez.
That's awesome.
Every college is there. Every college is streamed in. And like you just said, the talent on the court is incredible in all divisions, not just who we played, but everywhere. That's why it's invite only. They're really trying to get the best teams there.
That's great.
So you guys have done this in the past, and we'll get to your current team, because this is what we're all about. But kind of give us some of your past performers, guys, that maybe the common, the average person may not know, but the people in the know, that you're guys that came from Western Ranch and what they've done after, because our podcast is really about helping kids, get to the next level, whether it doesn't matter what level, D1, D2, NAI, we don't care. We think it's great for kids to pursue their passion, and give themselves an opportunity to just play as long as they can.
Yeah. So, people who have kind of been around the area or followed our program have, Eric Duncan kind of started off. Eric Duncan, Dylan Alexander, there was that group. Eric actually is on staff now. Then we went to the next group where it was like Jalen Ragsdale, Fred Lavender, D'Angelo Finley. And then last year's group had played together for a couple years. You had a couple of the guys on the team now, plus Gavin Wilburn, Titus Haley, and Jordan Johnson. But, I tell people all the time, the most influential people we've had in our program has been the dirty work team captain type kids that have, not really cared about playing time or stats or starting or not starting. And the three guys that don't get mentioned enough for us in those roles are Jordan Taga, Raul Melgarejo, and then currently now Keon Forbes.
That's awesome, and it's awesome that you give praise to those kids. That we all know how it is as a coach. Both Scott and I've coached. And having kids that are going to get down and get dirty and just do the work that a lot of people think that they're not necessarily above, but it's they have a different talent level, and so kids that are willing to be those blue collar, hard work or good work ethic kids are a dime a dozen.
Yeah, I think in general everyone wants to say they'll do what's best for the team, but will a kid do what's best for the team if that means a kid 2 years younger than him is going to play over him or start over him? And it's you really got to sacrifice your ego for the betterment of the team. And I think those three that I mentioned have really just set the tone and allowed our main guys to do what they can do, but stabilize everything on the back end of our roster and throughout our culture.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you just said that, because that kind of brings me up to the next question that I had for you. When you came into the program, we'll look at teams throughout the area, and it doesn't matter what sport, but we'll see teams throughout the area that will have, kind of maybe a program that will do well for 1 or 2 years, but you've really created a culture of winning there, and there's a lot that has to go into that. So maybe if you could expand on really kind of the winning mentality or the winning culture that you've created at Weston Ranch. And there's a lot of work that I'm sure that you have to do outside the gymnasium as well to get to that point.
Yeah, I think there's like 3 or 4 things that we've done to do that, and a lot of people always ask me that. I think one thing, we get a lot of, and our kids should get a lot of credit for, we've never had a D1 scholarship player since I've been there. And to me, with the success we've had, that just shows more to what you're talking about with the culture, that we have kids that maybe are overperforming their actual athletic and talent level. And then with that, being a former point guard, man, I think from Duncan to Ragsdale to Wilburn, now to Lindsay, I think the point guard has really set that tone to where we have been able to. I think every time with those 4, when I come into a game, and even with Coyleton now too, I always feel like I always had the best player on the court. And that exudes confidence in the team and creates that culture that we can win anytime we play. And then lastly, from the second I came in, we never wanted to play like nobodies. We always wanted to play the toughest schedule we could, get in the toughest environments we could, and that led to some losing. I mean, last year we started off 4-8, and we ended up winning the NorCal championship. So really getting those kids to buy in as a community and as a team, because they have to go through those experiences to do that. And whether that's in the off season or summer, or even during the season, as was the case last year, you have to grind it out. You can't just show up and expect to win. And our kids don't do that. And I think those 3 things speak to the culture the most.
That's awesome. Let me just go down. You and I talked a little offline that this is your 9th year, but just let me kind of revisit these teams. I mean, these records are phenomenal. Last year, 2nd place in TVL, 10-2 record, 24-12 overall. 18-19 first place, 12-0 in league, 31-2 overall. In 17-18 2nd place, 10-4, 19-11 overall. 16-17 3rd place, 9-5, 18-11 overall. 15-16 first place again, undefeated in league, 14-0, 27-5 overall. And then in 14-15 3rd, 10-4. 20-13 overall. I mean, and it's not a patty cake conference. I mean, you got some teams that can play a little bit, and so that continued success, comes, obviously with some talent, but obviously the coaching, and I'm sure you have some assistants that help you, to get your guys in a place to kind of buy into this winning culture.
Yeah, and then my second year when we flipped it, so when my first time I took over, we were very senior heavy. And then the next year we started 4 sophomores and a junior. So that group that's why you see the progression of them getting better and better and finishing with that 27-5 year. And then when that year happened, we flipped it over again, and we started 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores. And that's where you see the progression happen, and then they peaked out at 31-2. And now this year, we have a sophomore in the lineup and 3 sophomores right off the bench. So we're hoping that progresses up just like the past seasons have. But again, a lot of people call coaching. I don't think so. I think it's more a reflection on the amount of effort and dedication and openness to development that our kids have had throughout the program.
That's phenomenal. And so let's get into this year's team. I mean, and the team that you just took down to the tournament. You have Donye Lindsay, Myson Coyton, and then you have a couple of sophomores, Cody and Weary. Give us a little bit of a background on these kids and what the expectation you have for these guys going forward.
Yeah. I mean, Donye started every game for us since he enrolled at the school, so he's been a 4-year starter. His sophomore, junior year, he led us in scoring. He's playing the wing. We had Gavin and Titus at the point. And this year, we've kind of just, him and Myson, we give him the ball and kind of let him do his thing and give him the green light. And, he's grown every year. His freshman and sophomore year, he really developed his shot. He was able to shoot the ball a lot better. Going into this year, we're working on developing his decision-making as a lead point guard. And in this tournament, I just statted the games. He only averaged 3 turnovers a game throughout this whole tournament with the amount of
that's pretty awesome.
amount of time he has the ball in his hand.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's incredible for him. And he averaged 24.2 points a game throughout the tournament.
Against that elite competition.
Yeah, even the last game, he went up against a top 60 kid out of Durango from Vegas, and Donye had 27. So.
That's pretty...
And then Myson has started every game for us since his sophomore year. I mean, Myson is him and Gavin are the 2 kids that I've had that are just so competitive. They kind of just will you to win. But what gets lost with Myson is people think about the toughness and the willing to win, and he has a large amount of skill. He's a great passer. He can really knock down shots. And he's just a phenomenal teammate. He plays great in huge games. NorCal title game, he had 21 and 12. And he can guard any position. So, I mean, he's going to be one of the most decorated players to come through our program. And then, Cody. And Cody is, I mean, he's a 6'7" sophomore. Had a huge, semifinal game. He had like 20 and 12. So, great shot blocker, great defender. And he'll kind of carry us going forward after this year.
That's awesome. So give us a little background on this tournament. So I know you guys, and I know you've done us a huge favor because you're in between parent-teacher conferences. So, and we'll cut you loose here pretty quick. But kind of give us, we've had Scott and I are aware of some 7-on-7s that are going on out of state. A lot of softballs being played out of state. A lot of outside. So give us a little bit of that, how the tournament was set up. I'm sure it was, during the pandemic, how things were handled.
Yeah. So for the crowd, you can only, have 25% seating. So our parents had to buy tickets well beforehand. And then for us, we could only come in the gym a half hour before the game. So we couldn't just be in the gym all day watching all the games. We had to use a different entrance. We all had to have masks on when we came in. If we weren't playing, we had to wear masks. No shaking hands after the game with the other team. And then all the games, so each division, their games were at one specific site. So we played all our games at the same site.
Oh, okay.
So we weren't moving like everywhere.
Yeah.
And again, we played as an AAU team. We didn't play as a high school team.
No, yeah.
So there's no liability as a high school. So, and it was great, man. I mean, I think I was telling, our coaches, it didn't really even feel like AAU. It felt like real, it felt like league high school games, the intensity. So, I mean, there's supposed to be a second session in Vegas in 2 weeks, but they just canceled it today. So hopefully they can either move it back to Arizona or get it at a later date.
Yeah. Hey, Coach, as you're talking about, it's always great to hear coaches talk about development and getting kids ready to play at the next level. And the goal is to have kids coming out of your program as Division I basketball players, which I'm sure, at any level, that's quite an accomplishment. But as you go to the tournament in Arizona and you're going out of kind of outside of the norm when it comes to, high school sports. And we've talked about this on this podcast before, and we'll continue to talk about it, but we really feel that there is kind of a change that's occurring in high school sports where we're starting to see even the traditional high school sports where kids are getting recruited. They're getting recruited outside of the high school, and it's in the AAU basketball tournament or, showcase softball tournaments or things like that. So I guess my question to you is, when you go to a tournament like this, what's the impact in terms of recruiting that you're noticing? And it doesn't have to just be your team, but maybe in general.
Yeah, that's an outstanding question. I think to your first point, with the way things are changing, just from a basketball coach's perspective, I think, and it sucks for us three to hear, basketball coaches to hear at this level, basketball is actually trending away from your regular high school basketball. There's a lot more. You could see the top players in each state just going to prep schools within 3 to 5 years, where they're just connected to a school academically, but they're basically just training and playing basketball daily. And then
absolutely.
with that, there were 20, 30 prep schools like that playing this weekend. So when we go to these tournaments, especially with 6 seniors that we have that can all play at the next level, one, it's all streamed, so coaches that are still evaluating guys like Donnie and Meissen or trying to get a first look at some of our other seniors, they're able to get that first-hand film right now and not just banking on what our players did last year or the last time they saw them. And then when we come back home, we're able to stat it, and I'm able to, with social media, the connections I have, be able to send that out. And these tournaments, especially in these times, and I would assume this goes across all sports, there's two things. It gets these young athletes back to a sense of normalcy, which should help their mental health and get them having fun again and connected to some sense of the real world, but also, provide some exposure and opportunity to continue their career. Since I've been home past couple of days, I've connected with 20 to 40 coaches on multiple of our players. So who knows if that would have happened without going here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring up the mental health concern. That's something that we're talking about today during the podcast, is the mental well-being of the student athletes. So, I think there needs to be a big kudos out to you and your staff for really providing opportunities for your players. That's going, outside of basketball, it really is servicing their mental health and making them feel better about themselves and giving them an opportunity to express themselves in a sport that they love.
Yeah, and I think, I think you hear that a lot with politics right now, right? As bad as the pandemic is the response to it, more in a negative impact than the actual pandemic. And that's kind of what society is dealing with. The thing with our kids, and we tell them all the time, that, we can't control when we play a real game again or back in the gym, but we can control, and academically and conditioning and keeping our bodies in shape and getting to these big tournaments when we can is the best thing for this specific group that I have. So super proud of the entirety of the trip, not just how we played, but how we conducted ourselves on and off the court, and from parents to coaches to players.
Well, that's an awesome perspective, and like I said, it is fantastic to hear that from a high school coach that really gets it and really understands that basketball is just part of it, but there's a bigger picture. And on behalf of the student athletes, I'm sure more of them would say this, but thank you for that perspective. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So
you guys go through the same thing, so I think that's with everybody.
Yes, sir. So, Coach, before we wrap this up, I follow you on Twitter, and you're getting a lot of love from the community. I mean, and I don't necessarily. I mean, obviously it's associated with winning, but I think you won in multiple ways. Like you said, like we've already mentioned, getting those kids out, giving them the opportunity to be seen and all those types of things. And then the icing on the cake was winning the tournament. So before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like us to know or add? We'll be following you throughout the season, obviously, and hopefully we can get you back on once the season gets going.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, we spoke about our top three guys right there, but from C.J. Ward to Xavier Bell, Elliot Mobley, Elijah Mobley, Marshawn Smith, Jason Phillips, Keandre Watson. Our 4 through, people ask me why we did so good this week. Our 4 through 11 performed way above expectations and played with the same effort as our top 3. And I think, back to our culture, that is what cultivates the culture when it's not. I mean, it's great that Danye scored a lot of points and Meister made some plays, but, if those guys listen to this podcast, those guys are just as important as, Danye scoring a lot of points or Cody getting some dunks.
Yeah, we 100% agree. It's from the bottom pushes the top, and you guys are doing it the right way. So super proud of you guys. Wish you a ton of luck going forward. Hopefully we can get the season underway in some type of normalcy. We get a return to some type of normalcy, and be neat to see you guys.
You got to get me some sideline tickets to some Linden games. Actually, my top assistant, our defensive coordinator, I think he was an assistant coach. He might have been a freshman coach at Linden, probably about 15 years ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it was his first job, Eddie Menzel. So you won't be getting him back, though.
Well, thanks for your time, Coach. We appreciate you. Good luck going forward, and we'll be. Yep. We're fans.
Yeah, we're excited to.
Man,
we're excited to see.
Back on with you guys, man.
Thanks a lot, Coach. We're excited to see how things play out for you, and best of luck to you for hopefully a full season coming up. So
let's do it, man. I'm in for it. All right, guys. Thank you again.
All right. Have a great day.
Take care. Thanks.
This segment was brought to you by Herrera Insurance and Financial Services Incorporated, the premier commercial, farm, and life insurance agency in the 209. For all of your personal and business insurance needs, you can locate us at www.hifsinc.com or by phone at 209-649-8863. HISFS is a proud sponsor of the 209 Prep Sports podcast, helping our youth fulfill their academic dreams and endeavors. This segment has been brought to you by Pinelli Passing Academy. Pinelli Passing Academy is the premier quarterback development center in the Central Valley. If you have a son or daughter that strives to play quarterback from Pop Warner to college and beyond, look no further than Pinelli Passing Academy. Greg Pinelli will elevate your quarterback and provide them with elite instruction as well as teach them all aspects of the position. You can find them at PinelliPassingAcademy.com, Pinelli Passing Academy on Instagram and on Twitter. Welcome back, and we, after talking to Coach Teevan, it's Scott, you and I have talked about this a lot offline, kind of how COVID's affecting things and the pandemic and how much shutdown we have. We're still so much up in the air. There's still so many things that we don't know. There's a lot of rumors going around about when the school districts are going to actually go back to school. I know a few are going back in the next couple of weeks. And then there's some talk that some may not go back to January. So I don't know how that puts a wrench in plans, with things going forward or not. So,
yeah. And, we've obviously, since we've started this podcast, we've been in COVID and I think I speak on behalf of everyone in the United States that we're just sick of this.
Yeah.
And it's, again, we're not making light of the disease. We know it's real. We know it can be very severe. But at some point, you really have to take a look at the statistics, and you have to take a look at, is the reward really worth the risk? And I think when I say reward, I think what we really need to focus on, because we're talking about high school athletes, is the mental health aspect. How is the lockdown really depriving our student athletes from a mental health perspective. I mean, when I think that one of the big things about high school sports, and we've talked about the very low percentage of student athletes that move on to play at the next level. So a bulk of our student athletes are playing sport for the love of the sport, for the fun of it. They're getting physical activity. They're, regardless of the sport, they're getting a way to release, their emotions in a positive way. There's just so much that can be said about the positive impact that high school sports have on our student athletes, and from a mental health perspective. I mean, you're a coach. You see these kids come through here, and whether it's football, baseball, softball, it doesn't matter. You know that as a coach, a majority of your athletes are not going to be playing at the next level, and you treat them accordingly.
Yeah, it's the mental health part of it. The kids, if you really want to get under the weeds with it and dig into why things are the way they are, you think about, a kid that wants to play a sport, their grades are better. The kid that wants to play a sport tends to stay out of trouble because they don't want to jeopardize missing a game or what have you. A kid that plays a sport, actually probably takes more of a leadership role because they're held more accountable at a different level sometimes. And so, I think there's so many things that are affected by this. You have situational depression, kids that, and you're talking about 14 to 18-year-old kids that are going through a hormonal change. They're going through things and learning to have coping skills that, so, as teenagers, I look back as a teenager, I didn't know anything. I was kind of like, I was kind of flailing about. And when I graduated, I didn't know if I was going to go to college. I didn't know if I was going to go in the service. Now granted, it's 1989, and I didn't have a path. Nobody in my family had ever went to college. I mean, I had aunts that were starting college about the same time or were going through college, but no, I was the first one on my dad's side of the family to ever graduate from college. And, if it hadn't been for baseball, I would have never finished school. I just didn't have, and not that I wasn't intelligent or didn't have the ability. I just didn't have the desire. I didn't have the want.
Sure.
But, playing sports gave me the want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can completely relate to that story because I think, for me, it was basically the same situation. I was, I don't want to say a goof off in high school, but I maybe didn't take it as seriously as I should have. But it was always athletics that kept me on track. And then when I got to college, I kind of realized, I'm in a different situation here. I need to really focus on academics and so on. But, I think you and I have both agreed that we're going to take a hard line on never getting political on this show. And I don't know that what I'm about to say is political or not, but I got to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of the CIF. I'm just not. I think that they much like the NCAA, they overreach a little bit too far. And I think because of that, we're starting to see athletes put their focus more on club sports. And at some point in the future, I almost feel like the CIF is going to lose control completely. And the reason why I say that is because, if they keep employing these rules, and COVID is just an example, but if they keep putting rules after rule after rule on these athletes, at some point they're going to say, I'm not going to get recruited at the high school level anyway. I'm just going to focus on my club sport. And maybe that's baseball or wrestling or whatever. They're going to focus on that. And you're going to see, much like Little League Baseball is on a decline right now because parents are putting their kids in club baseball, and you're starting to see participation get less and less. And, at some point, I think the leaders at the CIF need to recognize this and realize that they have to make some decisions in a different way that are more in the best interest of the athlete, because I honestly don't believe that they always do. And I say that from a personal perspective because I've had to deal with that before with my own family. And quite frankly, I think the CIF just doesn't get it all the time. And we're talking about the mental health aspect of our athletes. When we look at the United States as a whole, look at how many states that we have that are playing high school sports. Now, just like Coach said, when they went to that tournament, they adhered to all the safety rules, and great for them. They found, the state of Arizona has found a way to have these events for kids that are very safe. And, statistics, and I'm going to talk about some here in a minute, but statistics are showing that they can do this and do it safely and still be able to compete. And so one of the states that we've talked about offline is the state of Wisconsin. So the state of Wisconsin did a quick kind of survey, not survey, but a study. And in May of 2020, there was a nationwide survey of over 13,000 adolescent athletes regarding the impacts of school and sport cancellation due to COVID-19 on a physical activity and mental health. Comparing the data from 3,200 Wisconsin athletes within the sample to data we collected from over 5,000 Wisconsin adolescents prior to COVID-19, we found that physical activity levels had dropped by 50%. By 50%. During the pandemic, the symptoms of depression had increased dramatically. And when you compare that to what the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, they state that young adults reported having worse mental health outcomes, increased substance use, and elevated suicidal ideation, which means that they're contemplating it and they're thinking about it. And this to me is a terrible situation. So again, I'm not trying to be political, but from, I've been an athlete, I've been a coach, I've been an official, I've been the parent of an athlete, and I personally, think the CIF is getting it wrong.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, I've heard it, in this particular situation with COVID, I don't know how much control the CIF actually has. I mean, they're kind of a governing body. But I get it. It's scary. The stats you just reeled off, it's not concerning. It's scary. I mean, you have kids that, and for a 50% decline in physical activity, you're talking about, it doesn't take long for 50 to become 100. I mean, we're in our 10th month, mid 10th month of this pandemic, of the relative shutdown. And in California, we've seen it it's been a lot more strict than other states. The CIF, for all that they do and all that they are, it's very polarizing with people, and mostly people that have had the experience with the CIF, whether it be a transfer, whether it be some type of whether they're an eligibility type of a thing, those are the things that they have some control over. Then they set the state schedules up and playoffs, and there's a lot of things that go on with the things.
There's no question.
Yeah, you see it, we see it, from. And if you're anybody who follows Twitter, you can go on Twitter for their CIF websites, and then the comment sections are just polluted.
Well, and it's funny to hear you say that, because if you go on and you read the whether it's the policies and procedures, rules and regulations within the CIF, it almost feels like they're kind of antiquated. Like, you look at other states, and the rules that are being enforced are different than what's being enforced in California. And I'm not going to go down a wormhole on any certain specific rule. I mean, hint, hint, wink, wink, maybe transfer stuff, but it really does deserve another look. And the money aspect of things, there's no question, because I get it, the CIF has to have money to survive. But when you have a high school team that makes a playoff game, or maybe they're hosting a postseason tournament or something like that, that school only gets a fraction of the income from that. And those are money makers for the CIF. We can talk about, like the single greatest event moneymaker in one location for the CIF is the state wrestling tournament. They make a ton of money on that. And, the argument could be made is, what are they giving back to the sport of wrestling? And I can tell you from being an old wrestling coach, it's not much. And so I get it. They have to have an income to function. But I honestly believe, and I said this before and I'll say it again, I honestly believe that at some point we're going to see something similar to what's happening to Little League Baseball right now in terms of participation. Now, granted, football is kind of the outlier because you don't have the club aspect in football as great as it is in other sports, but I think that's coming. I think COVID may be the catalyst for that change moving forward, but we'll see.
And I think that you're probably right. You know, the AAUs, the clubs, those types of things were created because there was a deficiency in something that previously existed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, I'm not gonna. I don't think I have as strong of an opinion as the CIF as you do. You know, I think the CIF was probably created out of a necessity at the time. You know, and the evolution, I don't know. You know, I don't know the history or the evolution of the CIF. So, you know, but you know, I do. There should be a fear. Everybody should be concerned about the direction of the future of high school sports. I mean, and it may not be important and an important enough topic for most people for it to be addressed. But for those that make a living around it, for those that use it, you know, look, I coach because I love coaching. Mm-hmm. I don't coach for the money. I mean,
for the tens of thousands of dollars that you're making coaching.
And I don't want, I mean, and it's not, I think it's for some people, it's important. That's a good, you know, the income is important to their families. But for me, you know, I've always donated my stipend back to the program. And it's just because I'm fortunate. I have my own business.
Yeah.
And so I have the ability to do that. And it helps us, you know, the kids to have newer equipment and the kids to have a nicer field and, better transportation and those types of things. We also have a phenomenal boosters club out here that I don't have to worry about. But to your point, you know, if there isn't somebody looking at this and how it can affect things, look no further than Little League. Look no further than the diluted product of Little League.
Yep.
You know, so you have, you know, kids that I would venture to say that the numbers, just throw it back 10 years ago, I would probably guess that the participation numbers are cut in half. Relative.
Yeah.
And I don't know that. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
I would say you're spot on, if not even greater than that.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, I know I'm jabbing the bear when I talk about the CIF, but I really think the CIF needs to reevaluate the way that they do things. You know, again, not to make light of this terrible disease that we're dealing with. And, you know, we could have people in here and argue about both sides of this all day long. But this, I think, is a pretty relative statistic, and I think it deserves to be out there. But the surveys, going back to the Wisconsin High School Athletics Survey, they completed some surveys over 207 schools that had restarted sports, representing over 30,000 student athletes. 30,000 student athletes, over 16,000 practices, and 4,000 competitive games in September of 2020. That's a lot of interaction.
Right in the heart of it.
That's a lot of interaction. That's a lot of student athletes. 271 cases of COVID-19 were reported amongst those student athletes. From 30,000 athletes, over 16,000 practices, 4,000 competitive games. In 1 month, 271 cases of COVID-19 were reported among student athletes. No cases resulted in hospitalization or death. CIF, I doubt you're listening to this, but if you are, get your head out and let these kids play.
Yeah, you know, the other part of that is that the NCAA went, so the biggest fear for the youth in correlation with COVID was that they felt that there was some tracing of heart issues associated with people who got COVID. And so most NCAA programs began to test the student athletes for those types of things. Those tests are no longer being done. They halted those tests 2 weeks ago. So it was you had a couple of outliers in the initial testing and the initial positive cases that probably had pre-existing heart conditions that were exacerbated by not being able to breathe because they were sick or what have you. So, you know, and we just had, you know, the World Series ended the other day, and one of the players tested positive during mid-game with COVID, and there's this huge outcry and outpouring of hate, or they're spewing hate about a guy that celebrated with this team. He was in the dugout with his team for 8 innings already. I don't think the 20 minutes of pictures.
Well, they pulled him out of the 6th inning, right?
Yeah.
So he's been playing for over half the game.
And they pregame for 2.5, 3 hours, and they're having lunch together and everything else.
Okay, which brings me to another point. Nick Saban. Okay, I think this proves to a certain degree, and it depends on where you're involved in it, that there's a lot that has to do with money in this decision-making process, because Nick Saban tested positive. He had COVID-19. But 3 days later, he's on the sideline with his football team.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they want it to happen, it can happen.
Yeah.
And guess what? None of his players or staff got infected by him.
Yeah. And it's not, that's the other part. You know, I think that there's so much unknown about this. You know, the flu's been around forever, and I'm not going to sit here and compare the flu to COVID or anything like that, but the flu's been around forever. You may get the flu, I may not. And I don't get it. I've never had a flu shot in my life. So you may get COVID, or I may get COVID, you may not, or I may not. Yeah. How do we know? And even if we get it, so many cases are asymptomatic. I saw a friend of mine on Facebook this morning posted the CDC total deaths of the United States back since 2017. So in 2017, we had 327 million people in the United States, and the deaths were almost equal to the same total death rate that we have now, with 331 million people. So over 4 million more in population. And the numbers, I think, are actually a little bit lower relative to 2017. Have we had some spikes? We have.
Sure.
But in totality, the fear that is being pushed to these kids, and why we're not doing certain things. And now we're having these other issues with the teachers unions and other factions that don't want to return because they have a fear. And I get it. I mean, I think it's a personal choice. And that's what's happening here. When the true reality of what's going on right now is our choices are being taken away. And it's just total horseshit. I mean, and this is a prep sports podcast, but there's no other way to put it.
I agree.
I mean, it's just, and you know, so I don't know what the answer is. I don't know when the changes are going to come. Hopefully they're going to come soon. You know, I don't know how much say the CIF has or doesn't have, you know, but whoever's in charge, you have to pay attention to the numbers. You have to think about something that's bigger than yourself. And I get it. I mean, it's killing people. I do understand that, but so do cars, so do cigarettes, so does alcohol, so does, walking across the street. You know, there's so many things that kill us. If we were to put ourselves in a bubble, we would never experience anything.
Yep. So I think to kind of get to the point where we're wrapping this up, I think the message we're trying to send is let them play.
Let them play.
Let them play. So, hey, let me ask you something. If somebody's listened to this, whether they're with the CIF or with somebody else, and they want to send some negative feedback to me about my little rant that I went on today, how would they be able to do that?
Well, you can always reach us on Twitter at 209prep. You can reach us on Facebook at 209prep sports. And you can always email questions, concerns, complaints, whatever, especially with our heated discussion that we had today. You can email us at prepsports209@yahoo.com. We really appreciate you guys listening. Truly thank Chris Teevan and his Weston Ranch Cougars and the experience that they had this last weekend. Anytime we have any success in the 209, we're gonna put it to the forefront.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, looking forward to next week's podcast. I'm really excited about the format that we're gonna have. We in anticipation of us getting our high school sports back, we're gonna start analyzing. I think we're going to start off with football teams, start analyzing some prep football teams. So if you're a listener and you want to hear about your team, start checking in with us, on a weekly basis. And I think at some point, once we get through football, I think we're going to try to start highlighting some of those other sports.
Sure. And so next week, we will jump off with our 2 state champions, Ripon High School football team, who won the D5 state championship last year, and then the Escalon Cougars, who won the D6 state championship. And we will also highlight Sierra and Manteca, who were section winners. So next week, we're going to revisit the winners of last year and the success that they had in their programs. We'll talk about some of their players and their returners. Moving forward, we will start highlighting individual leagues. So, so next week's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. We'll be able to get in front of some of these sports and have some start getting a preview of what's to come. So thank you everybody for listening, and tune in next week.